Hey guys, welcome back to Fantasy Tip. My name is Julian, and we just had a very crazy couple of days with the NHL trade deadline. Now that the fantasy playoffs are here or coming next week, for most people, you have to make some difficult decisions. Sometimes you have to drop some players from your team to make room for some players that are either playing more games or have more upside for the next few weeks. In this video, I'm going to be listing 40 players that I think you should drop from your team for various reasons. First things first, guys, the Edmonton Oilers only play 2 games this week and next week. So if your playoffs start this week, well, you're not looking that great. Obviously, if you have McDavid and Draisaitl, you're going to hold them. Nugent Hopkins is on IR, so you can keep him on your IR. Don't worry about that. But if you have a guy like Yamamoto, Puljujarvi, Larson, or even Darnell Nurse in shallower leagues, I would drop them because they're not going to be super useful these next couple of weeks. Just because they don't play a lot of games, there are options out there that play 4 games this week and 4 games next week. Jumping into some forwards to drop, guys, first on the list is Tom Wilson, 80% owned. And I'm not suggesting that you drop him right now. I'm suggesting you drop him as of Sunday, especially if you're in the playoffs this week. Well, Wilson's going to be very useful this week because he plays 4 games. Next week, they only play 2 games, and both are against the Islanders, who tend to not let in a whole lot of goals. Wilson's not going to be very useful for you next week. You can drop him as of Sunday after the game on Sunday. Next is Patrick Laine, Columbus Blue Jackets, 78% owned, and he wasn't traded at the deadline, as pretty much we all expected. So, guys, there's no reason to have him on your team. He's going to be a hindrance in the playoffs. You got to get rid of him now. Next is Brendan Gallagher, Montreal Canadiens, 62% owned. And guys, he's out for the rest of the regular season. There's no reason to hold him on your team anymore. I understand that maybe some of you have the IR space for him and just put him there, but you're better off using that IR space for somebody else, like maybe Tyler Seguin is a free agent. He's going to be back very, very soon, so I would scoop him instead. Next is Nino Niederreiter, Carolina Hurricanes, 60% owned, and I don't absolutely hate Nino Niederreiter. If you're in a deep league, you can keep him, but in shallower leagues, guys, he doesn't have that much value because he's not getting that top power play time like his line mates Trocheck and Natchez is occasionally getting top power play time. He's not as talented as those guys either. So there are probably better options floating around for you on the waiver wire. Next is Sean Monahan, Calgary Flames, 57% owned, and I like him kind of both ways. If you're in a really deep league and he's available, I'd scoop him up because Calgary recently shuffled their line and he's not playing with Gaudreau anymore, and in last game he actually got a goal. So you might as well stream him and see how that goes. Now, in shallower leagues, there are probably better players available to you than Sean Monahan, so I would drop him. Next is Mike Hoffman, St. Louis Blues, 57% owned, and he wasn't traded at the deadline because the Blues are making a push for the playoffs. Does that mean you should keep him on your team? No, it doesn't. He's going to continue to see third-line minutes and second power play time like he has all season long, guys. He's a great depth piece for the Blues, but he's not great for your fantasy team. You can drop him. There are better options. Same kind of thing with Dustin Brown's Los Angeles Kings, 56% owned. He's top line, top power play, so if you are in a very deep league, he's definitely a decent guy to have on your team. But if you're in a shallower league, well, Dustin Brown doesn't put up that many points. There may be better options on your waiver wire. Look for guys like Jason Robertson or a Kirby Dach that I prefer more than Dustin Brown, or even a defenseman like Jared Spurgeon I prefer than Dustin Brown. Next is Yanni Gourde, Tampa Bay Lightning, 53% owned. And are you kidding me? This is a really, really high ownership percentage for him. Are you really going to rely on a guy who's third line and second power play to carry you through the playoffs? That's pretty risky business. I understand that he's relatively hot right now, but I'd rather put my eggs in another basket than bank on Yanni Gourde. Obviously, if there's no one else available, he is semi-hot, and you can try to run with him, but don't be surprised if he doesn't put up any points at all. Now, I'm glad I did this video after the trade deadline finished because I had Jake Verona on this list, but now that he's been traded to Detroit, he may actually have some value because he'll probably get top line, top power play time. So I'd like to see how he does there first before I tell you guys to drop him. Next is Jean-Gabriel Pageau, New York Islanders, 48% owned. And there were rumors out there that once the Islanders got Palmieri and Zajac that he would be moved to the top line with Barzal and Eberle. That hasn't happened, and he's been really, really cold. He's playing on the third line, so his value is pretty limited. I would drop Pageau in the vast majority of leagues. Next is Jonas Donskoi, Colorado Avalanche, 47% owned, and he had a really hot stretch for a little while there. but he's cooled down, and I don't really expect him to continue like he did in that hot stretch. I think he's done. He does have top power play time, so if you're in a deep league, I would keep him. But other than that, there are probably better options for you out there. Next is Clayton Keller, Arizona Coyotes, 47% owned. And he's a guy that you pick up when he's hot, you drop when he's cold. He has 2 points in his last 7 games. He's cold right now. Do not rely on him to carry you through the playoffs. Drop him now and grab someone who can help you a lot more. Next is Anthony Cirelli, Tampa Bay Lightning, 42% owned. And I don't like Cirelli. He's not getting top power play time, and his winger Stamkos is injured. So don't expect him to really put up points because he's not much of a point producer to begin with. And especially with Stamkos out, he's a pretty easy drop right now. There are definitely some better options on your waiver wire. Next is Alex Killorn, Tampa Bay Lightning, 33% owned, and he's really cold right now. And on top of that, Stamkos is injured. It really takes a toll on his value. He's playing with Cirelli and Joseph right now on the second line, which isn't that great of a second line. So Killorn is someone that you can drop because he will not help you very much right now. When Stamkos comes back, you can consider re-adding him because he does get that top power play time. But for now, I don't like Killorn. Next is Brandon Tanev, Pittsburgh Penguins, 33% owned, and he's on the LTIR, so he could be missing the rest of the season. Drop him unless you have the IR space. Next is Ellie Tolvin in Nashville Predators, 26% owned, and he was insanely hot, doing very well. But he's week to week with a lower body injury, so he may not end up playing for the rest of the season. If you have the IR space, I guess you can keep him. But other than that, guys, drop him, grab someone else who's going to help you. Next, Adrian Kempe, Los Angeles Kings, 25% owned, and he doesn't get that top line time with Anze Kopitar. He does get the top power play, but to me, that's not enough to justify owning Adrian Kempe. There are a lot better options that you can have for the playoffs right now. Next is Jordan Kyrou, St. Louis Blues, 22% owned, and as great as he was earlier in the season, it's as bad as he is now. St. Louis is using him on their fourth line, and he's playing barely any minutes at all. He's not even getting power play time at the moment. I would really rather stay away from Jordan Kyrou. Next is Matt Zuccarello, Minnesota Wild, 23% owned, and with Fiala being injured, they reunited the Zuccarello-Kaprizov-Rask line. So in that sense, it's good. So if you're in a super deep league, you can take a chance on him, but he hasn't been producing in a good while. And until I see him producing again, I'm not going to have him on my team. I'm not going to take that risk. Last but not least for my forwards is Noel Acciari, Florida Panthers, 14% owned. And ever since Barkov has been back from injury, Acciari's role has pretty much been a lot more limited. Same thing could be said with Wenberg and Vetrano. Now, they have a really good schedule next week. So if you're in an insanely deep league and you really are desperate to grab someone, I wouldn't grab Acciari, I would grab Wenberg just because of his deployment with Huberdeau. Now, this is only because they play Columbus Monday and Tuesday next week. After that, you can drop them. First is Keith Yandel, Florida Panthers, 70% owned, and I would actually hang on to him in the majority of leagues. But if you're in a really shallow league, well, Keith Yandel is really not producing right now. I do expect him to start producing relatively soon because he's still getting that top power play time for Florida. Now, if Keith Yandel doesn't produce in the next game or two, I'm going to drop him in the majority of leagues because you can't afford a guy like that when you're in the playoffs. You just can't afford to miss out on points just because you have Keith Yandel on your team who's stinking it up. Next is Justin Falk, St. Louis Blues, 63% owned. And especially in points leagues, I don't like him very much. He's not getting power play time anymore, and Vince Dunn was not traded at the trade deadline. That means that Falk probably won't start seeing power play time. So I don't really like him in points league. In categories leagues, he's a little bit better, but even then, I'm not that high on him. Next is Zach Werenski, Columbus Blue Jackets, 52% owned, and he's out for the rest of the season, so there's no point having him on your team. Next is Nick Leddy, New York Islanders, 46% owned, and he has not been very good lately. I'd rather not have him on your team. There are better options out there in all likelihood. Like, honestly, I'd even rather Vince Dunn, who's very lowly owned right now and has been doing very well. Next is Ryan Suter, Minnesota Wild, 33% owned, and he's really sucked this year. His peripherals are crap, and he's not getting points enough to really make him valuable in any kind of league. I'd rather look elsewhere for defensemen. If Jared Spurgeon is available, he's the defenseman that I want to own in Minnesota right now. Next is Justin Schultz, Washington Capitals, 31% owned, and for the exact same reason that I listed Tom Wilson as a drop is the reason I'm listing Justin Schultz as a drop. Washington only plays 2 games next week, and they're against the Islanders. I don't like that very much. Obviously, if you have Schultz and you're in a deep league, hold on to him until the end of the week. Washington has 4 games this week, so he's valuable this week if you need him this week. If your playoffs only start next week and you're firmly in the playoffs, I would drop Schultz now and add someone who's going to help you next week. Next is PK Subban, New Jersey Devils, 21% owned, and he's very, very useless right now. He's doing nothing in New Jersey. If I had to have a New Jersey defenseman, it's Ty Smith, but that's only in points league. Last but not least is Rasmus Andersson, Calgary Flames, 18% owned. He was valuable earlier in the season when he was producing on Calgary's top power play, but he's not there anymore. So Rasmus Andersson makes for such an easy drop because he's been so bad. Jumping into some goalies now. First on the list, guys, is Ilya Samsonov, Washington Capitals, 86% owned. And this goes back to the fact that Washington only plays 2 games next week. Hold on to Samsonov until Saturday or Sunday, whichever day he ends up playing. And after that, you're going to want to drop him. Because next week, he may not even get any of the starts. Vanacek has been outplaying him lately, so it could be Vanacek playing both games against the Islanders. Even then, if you're in a shallower league, you can drop Vanacek too, because Vanacek may end up splitting the games next week. They'll each get 1 game, in which case they're both really not very valuable. So if you are in a shallower league and there are other goaltenders available that are going to get more games, I would go for those goalies. Next is Frederik Andersen, Toronto Maple Leafs, 81% owned, and he's not going to be back for the rest of the regular season, in my opinion, because the Leafs are using his LTIR cap space, and they don't even have room to bring him back. There's no reason to hang on to him. He's probably on your IR if you do have him, but you could probably use your IR for something better. If Tyler Seguin is out there, I would drop Frederik Andersen for a Tyler Seguin or even a Ben Bishop because he should be back soon. Next is Carter Hart, Philadelphia Flyers, 69% owned, and that's way too high of an ownership. He's been doing a little bit better lately, but not good enough. You cannot afford to have this guy on your team for the fantasy playoffs. It is way too risky. Next is Kaapo Kähkönen, Minnesota Wild, 46% owned, and this guy's only starting back-to-backs. And in his last game, he really sucked, guys. So I would drop him in like 95% of leagues because he only is getting back-to-back games. And you're going to want a goalie who's going to start a lot more games than that. Next is Casey DeSmith, Pittsburgh Penguins, 37% owned. And I can't understand why a guy who's only really been starting back-to-back games is 37% owned. Now, I understand Pittsburgh has a back-to-back Saturday, Sunday, so he will get a game this week. But holding on to a goalie who's going to play 1 game in a week is not a very good idea, guys. There are probably better goaltending options out there. He's a guy you can pick up on Sunday to stream him on Sunday, not someone to hold all week long. Next is James Reimer, Carolina Hurricanes, 36% owned. And it looks like Carolina is playing goalie carousel, kind of like the Rangers were last year, which is a fantasy nightmare. Now, Mrazek should get the majority of the starts, and the other starts should be divided relatively evenly between Reimer and Nedeljkovic. Now, Mrazek kind of laid a sinker next game, so if you have Nedeljkovic, you can still wait and see if he starts getting more starts. And Reimer started on Monday night, but honestly, there's probably better options out there that are going to get you more starts than a James Reimer. Next is Jake Allen, Montreal Canadiens, 34% owned. And this is only when Price gets healthy kind of thing. Once Price comes back from injury, you got to drop Jake Allen because he's not going to get enough starts to really help you through the playoffs. So guys, as soon as they confirm Price is healthy, you have to drop Allen right away. Next is Braden Holtby, Vancouver Canucks, 29% owned. And what on earth are you still doing with him on your team? He's going to get 1 game this week, assuming all things go right for Vancouver. He's going to get 1 game next week because there's a back-to-back set. He hasn't been very good either, so he could get lit up and not help you at all. There are so many better goalie options for your first week of the playoffs. Next is Pavel Francouz, Colorado Islanders, 27% owned, and he's probably on your IR if you still have him, but there's no reason to still have him because he's clearly not going to be coming back this season. Colorado would not have traded for Johansson and Dubnyk if he was. There are better things to be doing with your IR, so drop Francouz. Next is Pekka Rinne, Nashville Predators, 22% owned. He's another goalie that's been pretty much relegated to just back-to-back games, and that's not going to be good enough to help you in the fantasy playoffs. Drop him now, add someone who's going to get some more games. Next are Dan Vlader and Jeremy Swayman. Rask and Halak are both very close to returning, so they're not really going to help you for the playoffs. Rask could be back as soon as Tuesday, so these guys being on your team, not going to help you. Go and grab someone else who will actually help you, get a few starts in the playoffs. All right, guys, so if you own any of the players that I mentioned that you should drop from your team, you guys can watch my ads video right up there if you haven't yet. Those are players that you can add to your team to replace these players that are not going to produce for you. And those players that I mentioned in the video are guys that should help you a lot more than any of the guys that I mentioned on this list. All right, guys, you've reached the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching all the way through. I really appreciate it. Please leave a like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, leave a comment, ask me a fantasy hockey related question. I'll be happy to answer you. Until next time, guys, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you in the next episode of Fantasy Tipped.